Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar this afternoon for the Churchill Trust, and we'll get underway shortly. We'll just leave a little bit of time to allow everybody to get on board this afternoon. So in about another 30 seconds or so, we'll begin proceedings properly. Well, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are actually tuning into this webinar from around Australia this afternoon, this evening. My name's Lee Radford, delighted to be with you to host the event tonight, but it's not about me, it's actually about our special guests and you finding out more about what it is to become a Churchill Fellow. This, of course, is the Agricultural and Horticultural Food Production session. And if you haven't come across me, and there's a very good chance you may not have, my name is Lee Radford. I have been in agricultural journalism for about, or the best part of 40 years now, and most of that with the ABC. In fact, I was the national head of ABC Rural for the last 12 years of my full-time career with the ABC. So responsible for programs like Landline, Backroads, the Country Hour on radio, a whole other suite of radio programs, and ABC Rural Online. And I've got to tell you, I've had some of the most marvellous adventures of my life working for ABC Rural, and particularly in the younger years as a very active ABC Rural reporter out in the landscape. I still do a little bit of casual broadcasting for the ABC these days. I'm still involved in representing Australia to the world of agricultural journalism through the International Federation of Agricultural Journalists, and I'm also involved as a trustee on the Global Foundation of Agricultural Journalists as well. So enough about me. Welcome again to this session. It's presented by the Churchill Trusts, which runs these fellowships, and they are wonderful, these fellowships. I can't tell you how many Churchill Fellows I have met in my travels over the years, and some of the adventures and experiences that Churchill Fellows get to have are just extraordinary. And at the end of the day, it's about learning, it's about knowledge transfer, and it's about bringing those experiences back, not necessarily just for your benefit as a Churchill Fellow, but those around you as well, for your businesses, potentially, employees, and people that you deal with more broadly. These are real growth experiences for people, in my experience, and a wonderful thing to be successful at securing if you're able to do that. So this session is about trying to learn a little bit more about how to go about it, to ask questions, and potentially compare notes. I'd just like to briefly acknowledge that we're all meeting on somebody's country, but I'm meeting on the land of the Kaurna country up in the Adelaide Hills, up above metropolitan Adelaide, and acknowledge their leaders of past, present, and emerging. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we really get into the good stuff. This is recorded, as I think you're aware now. This session's shared with all of those who registered, and it's also available on the Churchill Trust YouTube. Closed captions are available. There's a 7-second delay apparently with those, and you can click a button at the bottom of the screen if you're interested in getting those. Now, just to explain how things are going to work this afternoon, in a moment I'm going to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the Trust, and after that, two Churchill Fellows who have had great experiences in their own right, who you can tap into their experience and find out a little bit more about what they've done, how they've gone about it, and how they applied for this in the first place. We'd invite your questions. Please don't be shy about asking questions. You can pop those into the question button down, the Q&A part of the screen down the bottom, which is just to the right-hand side of the share button if you sort of hover your mouse on the screen that you're on at the moment. Before asking a question, though, you might want to check the FAQs on the website, churchilltrust.com.au. We'll pop up a link. Many questions on the website have come from previous sessions like this, and they've been asked by people like yourselves. So there's a good chance that possibly things that are on your mind have actually already been discussed and are there for you to have a look at in your own time. Right now, though, to get things underway, I'd like to hand over to Christine Dacey. Now, Christine is the Chief Executive Officer of the Churchill Trust, and she joined the organisation just before Christmas, following decades as a senior public service servant in the Commonwealth Government, working across aviation, infrastructure, immigration, education, youth affairs, and superannuation. Christine, I'm not sure what you missed out, but whatever it was inconsequential. Good evening to you.
Thanks, Lee. I missed out on agriculture, ironically. So here we go. An opportunity for me to learn. Thanks for that. And I would like to acknowledge that I am coming from beautiful Ngunnawal land and very much associate myself with the acknowledgement of country that you did, and also state up front that the Trust is very committed to the participation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our fellowship program. As Lee said, this is about giving you the information you need. We've done quite a few of these now, so we're getting a handle on the sorts of questions we might have, but every fellow's story sort of prompts a whole bunch of different thoughts and observations. So really encourage you to ask what you need to ask, and also not to panic if we don't get to your question today. There are FAQs, and you can talk to me and the team afterwards if you've got questions that are specific for you. I'm going to do a really short PowerPoint because, you just don't want to bore people to death with PowerPoints. But just a little bit about who we are. As the name implies, the Churchill Fellowship honours the legacy of Sir Winston Churchill, and it's a living legacy. As a leader, he was very committed to the power of public service and really believed that individuals had a huge capacity to create change. And so that's very much where the fellowship is derived from. He passed away 60 years ago. And when that happened, there was a massive national door-knocking appeal. And the result was one of the largest public fundraising efforts in Australia's history. We raised about £2 million, which is a lot of money back in the day, so much so that the banks had to stay open on a Sunday. I guess the good news for you is that, and for the Trust, is that that money continues to provide for about 100 fellowships a year. I get asked a lot, what is a fellowship? And we like to define it very broadly as something that is life-changing, has a lot of prestige attached to it. It's open to all Australian citizens and permanent residents who are over 18 years of age, and there's no upper age limit. I think one of the things that we're proudest of is that it is not an academic qualification. You don't need an academic qualification to apply. We use the phrase from all walks of life, and we really mean that. So we encourage you, if you're out there thinking, oh, I've not done this, or I'm not a PhD student, please don't let that be a barrier to you. We are really a broad church in that sense. We want to hear from you if you've got a good idea. Basically, it involves travelling overseas for a period of between 4 and 8 weeks to observe best practice, build networks, observe how other countries do things, gather insights to the problem or issue that you are interested in, and then talking to us and coming back and applying some of those things in Australia. The topic can be pretty much anything. And in many ways, we offer lots of niche opportunities that you mightn't get elsewhere. And what we find are the fellows who tend to get selected through what's a pretty competitive selection process are the ones who really convey their passion and the work they've done and the thinking they've done about their topics. I guess importantly, we found anecdotally, and I'm sure that our fellows here today will really back this in, the name itself gets you a lot of access to people and thought leaders and, pretty inspirational on-the-ground practitioners and people who can influence. And that's certainly one of the big benefits that we highlight to people. And it also offers you opportunities when you come back after your travel and have published your report to become part of the Churchill alumni. And that's an incredible group of individuals. For our history, we're very proud to have given more than 4,800 Australians this opportunity since 1965. To the nuts and bolts, eligibility, as I said, you have to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident who is 18 or over. And you have to tell us about what sort of project you're doing. It's got to be an individual project, not a group project. The one exception to that is we have a new category of joint applications between an Indigenous and a non-Indigenous person, so long as the topic is focused on First Nations issues. So individual projects, not teams. If you have a disability or you live remotely, we do offer things like additional travel support, including virtual and hybrid options that might encompass domestic travel in very specific circumstances. And we can give you more information about it. But I will just say, first and foremost, the focus is about travelling offshore, having a look at what other countries and jurisdictions are doing and bringing that back. You do need to show us that your project is self-contained and be of benefit to the Australian community. And that doesn't mean the whole of Australia. It could mean your local community. It could mean other communities. So, but it's got to be not just your personal interest. It's your personal interest in combination with what are you going to do with that to help others. We encourage you to think about, has the topic been fully explored within Australia first, because that's why you'd need to go offshore, or is there some new angle that you're thinking about that someone else hasn't? We really do remind people that it's not just a trip overseas. It's a really significant investment in you and your expertise and your passion and your enthusiasm and your willingness to get in there and have a go at making a change. Some top tips. We get about 1,000 or so applications a year, of which about 100 get chosen. So it's really competitive. So have a think about these tips when you are thinking about forming your application. Why is your project important now? Who will it help and how? What makes you the right person to deliver on this idea? And where do you want to go and why? We get a lot of questions on what level of detail you need around your itinerary, and I'm sure our fellows will talk to you about their experience. We don't hold you to every dotted I and crossed T when you apply, but you have to give us enough information as part of that to say, right, I'm going to these 4 countries for these sorts of times to talk to these sorts of organisations. Because what we need is for the panel to understand, okay, I'm going to the US, Canada, the UK and Norway. You can't put down, I'm going to those 4 countries and it'll be, 6 weeks, and then come back to us and say, oh, now I've got to go to Kyrgyzstan, or oh, now I've got to go to, Morocco. We need to have enough of a credible outline to understand where you're going, who you're talking to, and frankly, how much the fellowship itself is going to cost. When you're writing your application, be short, sharp, punchy, concise, specific, avoid jargon, don't write it like it's a PhD. Focus on really communicating your passion, enthusiasm, and insight into what you are talking about and how you can see it making meaningful change through your fellowship. As Lee said, we're going to do questions and answers. I'm going to get out in front of the absolutely most common ones that we get asked. How much is a fellowship worth? And the amount varies based on how long you're overseas and where you're going. But last year, the average amount for about a 6-week fellowship was $35,000. And fellows tell us very consistently that is a satisfactory amount of money. What expenses does it cover? It covers all elements of your travel, accommodation, meals, and other fees that have been approved in your application. So it is important to think about what you put in your application, because if you come back to us after it's been approved and say, oh, I want to add some more things in, that is not something that we can readily do. What theme or category do I apply under? You're noting that we're doing a category that's themed towards agriculture tonight. We say to people, don't get too hung up on that. Because some people say, oh, mine could be, under education, it could be under the arts, it could be under ag. Pick the theme that you think most resonates, and the selection panels in each state and territory will do some sorting. Nothing that you tick in terms of the theme will count for you or against you. Applications open this Friday and close on the 1st of May. Interviews will be July, August, and they are in person. We can answer more questions on that. And I think all the dates for this were on that holding screen before you come in. Announcements are around about September, and we have a big onboarding session in Canberra for all fellows in November. So it's quite an intense year. We do advice for you on that. And your travel can happen from November this year over a 15-month period to the end of January in 2027. So I'll stop talking, but I guess my big thing is, you know, if you're really committed and thinking that you've got a great idea, we would absolutely love to hear from you. And, you know,
Sorry, a few things going on at my end, and I'm not sure why my video is not working. But there you go. Here we go. We're back. Christine, thank you for that. So much good information there. And honestly, the Churchill Trust, it's an amazing organisation. These fellowships are golden opportunities for people who are successful at getting them. They are genuine door opening opportunities for individuals who are successful through this process. And I've got to say, in my nearly 40 years of being involved in agricultural journalism, it is often the people you meet, and in this case, in the case of doing a Churchill Fellowship, and certainly with a lot of my experience going to other countries through agricultural journalism, you get to meet some amazing people who build your knowledge base, but build your contact base as well. And potentially down the track, you have the chance to form genuine friendships with people wherever this Churchill Fellowship may actually take you. And certainly my experience has been that I've formed some amazing friendships with people in different parts of the world, involved in different parts of agriculture, which have been enormously beneficial for me. I'm sure it will be for you as well. Now, moving right along, I'd like to introduce you to the first of two of our Churchill Fellows tonight who are speaking and offering you some insights into their experience. The first of those is Stuart McGruddy. Now, Stuart is at the other end of the country from me. I'm in drought-stricken South Australia at the moment. He's in in Queensland, where it seems to rain a lot, and has certainly been raining a lot recently. Stuart's the founder and managing director of My Berries, which was established back in 2013 when Stuart and his wife Alison rose to the challenge of effectively fighting food waste by finding every berry from their local family farm a home to go to. Now, in 2020, Stu was awarded the Horticultural Innovation Churchill Fellowship to build on the knowledge, experience, and technology used in, believe it or not, the freezing of whole soft berry fruits. But he's a whole lot more interesting in telling you about his experience. So, Stu, welcome to you, and I'll hand over to you to tell us a little bit more about your journey.
Thanks, Lee. Yes, as you mentioned, I was awarded a 2020 Churchill Fellowship with Port Innovation, looking at the technologies, processes around freezing soft fruits from our family farm, but also farms in our local area. It started off with on our farm having some beautiful fruit that if you were to come to the farm, would love to share with you. But if it was to go to the supermarket, it might not get the shelf life, or it might be a little bit wonky. And so we started processing that fruit in a small facility in Caboolture. And as we grew our business, we got bigger customers and got bigger orders, and we had to look at different ways and that we could, the new technologies that we had to use to be able to do that. And we found that the only people out there telling us what to do were trying to sell us something. And so that's kind of like where we became aware about the Churchill program. And I bumped into a fellow Churchie who had been awarded a fellowship a few years earlier, and he recommended to apply. So we, so sorry, um, so we took that opportunity to look at different countries that were fairly well established and had already made the mistakes that I was going to make. And so we found out that in Poland, that they didn't have a huge amount of fruit waste. Every piece of fruit that was grown on the farms found a home. That in Spain, they had these wonderful technologies that came out at the around the start of COVID around high-speed processing. In the US, they'd developed really strong markets and be able to integrate the technologies of freezing, but also having really smart processes around how they worked with growers to make sure the fruit came back to their processing facilities nice and quickly. And in Spain, in South America, it used to have a reputation of a low quality frozen fruit, and in Chile, and now it's got a reputation of high quality. And so it's really great to go over there and see everything that they put into practice, bring it home, do up a report, and then share it with everyone in the industry, because we're an ambassador, we believe, for the for Australian produce, and we don't want to see farms dumping a lot of fruit. Now, with the application, I did a lot of research into making it really simple and clear. But once I was awarded it, as Emma kind of mentioned, I found I had an imposter syndrome, where I was awarded this fellowship and I was like, oh, these people might not want to talk to me, or they might be too busy. But it was really incredible just how the Churchill name and the team were able to open doors. And if you are successful, I recommend that, just to say that 5 weeks or 6 or 8 weeks might seem like a long time, but once you're in the countries and you're talking to the people that you'd like to meet, they often will have recommendations of, oh, I know exactly what you're after. You need to talk to this other business tomorrow, or the amount of connections that will open up is absolutely incredible. So yeah, my top tips are really read as many reports as you can before you do your application as well, to really understand what yourself, your industry, and what you're looking at can get out of it. And really lean on and get support from the Churchill team as well. They've just answered every question that I have. So as you can tell, I can get a little bit nervous from time to time, but from my fellowship, we've been able to make a massive impact to the fruit waste, not in just our area. We're now working with farms all through New South Wales, all through Queensland, a few in Victoria. And we've been able to take a lot of the learning that we've been able to pick up from these other countries and bring them back and implement them. So yeah, be clear on what you want to achieve. I'm happy to answer any questions. Please read my report. And and the other thing I want to say, that what I found was really useful too, is after I was awarded I got awarded the fellowship in 2020, but I couldn't travel till 23. And in that time, a baby came along and different changes happened in my life. But the Churchill team were able to assist in making the travel possible. Yeah. So anyway, that's my little couple of minutes. I'm sure talking about my experience.
That's great, Stuart. Thank you very much for sharing that. And there are already a whole host of questions I'd like to ask you myself, let alone anybody else. If you want to ask Stuart or anyone else on the session this afternoon questions, please do so. Go to the Q&A down the bottom of the screen. If you have a look at, if you hover down with your mouse at the bottom of the screen, the Q&A tab is just between share and show captions. So please start typing away if you've got anything that's on your mind. We'd love to answer your questions. Now, in a moment, we're going to meet Tim, but I just wanted to take a brief a couple of minutes to tell you about a couple of other things. These are more, there are sponsored fellowships, I should say, which are dedicated to more specific topics. An example of this, for instance, is the Saskia Beer Churchill Fellowship to support innovation in food production and farming. Now, this one's really about supporting people who are passionate about food, so cooks, chefs, farmers, growers, producers, entrepreneurs. It's in memory of Saskia, who you may or may not recall. She died unexpectedly at the age of 46. 5 years ago, back in 2020. And it's thanks to the generous sponsorship of her parents, Colin, and the famous Maggie beer that this exists. Now, Saskia was, by all accounts, a passionate and instinctive cook with a great gift for flavour and a fascination with all food cultures. Her father, Colin, he received a Churchill Fellowship back in 1978 to investigate commercial game bird breeding and tourism potential, which he went on to make something out of. Saskia was often asked to speak at farming conferences to share her philosophy and her ideas, and was always driven by making a difference rather than making a financial gain. And another one just quickly of relevance to this group, the Ron Badman Family Churchill Fellowship for an aspect of agriculture with a focus on seed production, pasture development and irrigation. Ronald Badman was a self-employed pasture seed producer and grazier near Naracoorte in my state in South Australia. He was awarded a Churchill Fellowship in 1967, and he ended up travelling to the United States where he studied irrigated seed production, processing and marketing. Now, Ron was so impressed by the life-changing experience that in 1990 he became the very first Churchill Fellow to sponsorship opportunities for others. So there are just a couple of great examples that have occurred through this organisation over the years, and there are more than one ways to skin a cat. There are many doors potentially to walk through. I'd now like to introduce the second of our Churchill Fellows this evening, depending on where you're tuning in from around Australia, and that's Tim Roache. Now, he was born and raised on a family dairy farm in the southwest of Victoria. Tim's had over 25 years of experience right across the dairy supply chain, starting from milking cows to selling some amazing dairy products over the years. In 2017, Tim received the Jack Green Churchill Fellowship to modernise milk price models and manage price risk in the Australian dairy market. Now, Tim, a great deal has happened across those 25 years. Can you give us a sense of the path that you've taken through your working life to get to the point of your own Churchill Fellowship? And welcome to you, Tim Roache.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate the introduction. It's great to be joining you today. My Churchill Fellowship journey, I suppose, started over 10 years ago. The good news is it's still going, and I honestly don't think it ever ends. Once you sort of jump into this, there's sort of a bit of an onus, I think, on the individual, and certainly for me to keep giving back to the communities and the industries that we work in, and are so pivotal for our country. So it was a phenomenal, a privilege for me to be awarded this as a kid growing up. Lee sort of mentioned on a dairy farm near Colac. Down in southwest Victoria. To be sitting where I am today has been quite the journey, and the Churchill Fellowship has been very much a part of that. So a bit like you mentioned, actually, I was fortunate enough to receive one of the scholarships, which was the Jack Green Churchill Fellowship for the dairy industry, and I was awarded that in 2017. There is a sort of a fancy title. The way I like to think of it is I want to make sure that we can all eat fantastic cheese and ice cream for the rest of our lives, and all the other amazing dairy products that come with that. Equally, we've got to be able to make sure that the farmers right through to the whole industry and supply chain, and particularly the communities that it operates in, can thrive as part of that, because they're so pivotal to what we do. So that's what I set out to do. I was really fortunate to travel. I think it was all up about, it was nearly 15 countries, 53 days on the road, 13 flights. I drove nearly 6,000 kilometres right across Europe, US, from the north to south of New Zealand. about 140 people all up. I met over those 7 and a bit weeks. 63 organisations spanning from private, individual dairy farms, with one person producing a very small amount of cheese, right through to some of the biggest cheese producers in the world that would be putting, cheese on, the pizzas that we all know. And everything in between, government organisations, big supermarket chains, you name it. I had the opportunity and the benefit to be able to spend time with them, and a lot of that was, as mentioned, obviously, you very much need really strong contacts and networks yourself. But the Churchill name, Winston Churchill himself, the trust absolutely opens doors, and you've got to be prepared to do that. But it was a fantastic and just sort of a once a lifetime opportunity. It continues on today. I'm still heavily involved in the industry. I'm working actually with the government at the moment and my colleagues around what we've now got as a mandatory code of conduct for the Australian dairy industry. It is giving back, but it's also a part of the sort of commercial world we operate in. So there's really nice synergies between those two. What I thought I'd just quickly touch on, I've got a sort of couple of minutes, is the actual process itself. And my overall, if there's one thing there's two things I'd love you to take away. One today is absolutely do it, apply. But my second and very sort of quick point is you will get out of this what you put into it. And that is from preparing from the application right through to the interview process, which is intense, right through to the actual fellowship itself, undertaking the travel, right through to the report, which once again, certainly for someone like me, was tough to sit down and finish, but so pivotal. And then the work that continues on, which doesn't really have an end date per se. But some top tips from me. Look, I think be really prepared, be succinct. This is super competitive, so you're pitching yourself against all the other applicants. So when your application, be clear, make it really simple, get your message across, and then similarly in interviews, they are short, they are sharp, they are intense. I sit on an interview panel now. You need to stand out, so be prepared. The travel, I travelled for a young family, 2 children, aged about 2 and 4, I think at the time. I was away for 53 days, non-stop travel. So think about that too. It is a long time to be away. I've travelled a fair bit previously, being prepared for that, everything that comes with it. And be prepared for the ride of your life. It is super exciting. It brings so many emotions. I think, there's anxiety in there. Geez, who am I going to meet next? Where am I going to be traveling to? It is a roller coaster, but absolutely, I come back to this thing. The more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. It's a super rewarding experience. So I'd highly encourage you all to absolutely prepare well, put an application in and be prepared for that ride of your life. It is it is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I think Christine mentioned it. But if you're not successful the first time, please come back and apply again. It will stretch you. You'll grow, and then ideally, you return that back to the Australian communities, the industries, and the people, the businesses that we work with.
Tim, thank you for that. Really interesting and great tips. And that's what this session is all about this afternoon, this evening. It's tapping into your experience, into Stuart's experience as well, and giving people as much information as possible to help them position themselves to be successful in what is a very competitive process for these Churchill Fellowships. Now, I'd encourage you, if you are online and joining in this afternoon, this evening, to actually ask some questions while we've got the experience of Tim and Stuart with us. If you go down to the bottom of the screen and go to the Q&A tab, click on that. You can type in your question, and we'd be delighted to answer as many questions as we can in the time that we've got remaining for this particular session. Now, Stuart, the first one is actually for you, and our questioner says, thank you for what you said, really good. You mentioned to read a lot of reports before applying, and our questioner is really asking for clarification there, I think. Stuart, do you mean Churchill reports specifically, or other literature to fill the gap, so to speak?
In a certain sense, both. I think take the time to really understand what's in Australia already that you can access. I spent time to make sure that that no one else had already learned and was able to share what I needed to know. So, and the Churchill reports is a great place to start, especially if it's around horticulture. Go through, see what other people have already done first. Make sure that question you're trying to answer isn't already answered. And and be your own expert and understand that area as well as you can when you do your application.
Now, a couple of quick questions from another participant this afternoon. I'll just do them one at a time rather than confuse everybody. The first one is pretty straightforward. At the time of application, does the applicant need to have an actual list of places that they're proposing to visit? Is that level of detail required in the application? I'm presuming it is, but gentlemen?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think that the more robust your plan, the more you can pitch your idea, the better chance you've got of success. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but a pretty clear sort of succinct plan that you can execute will absolutely hold you in the best stead in that application and interview process.
Can I just take you back to yours, Tim? I mean, how detailed were you when you actually applied? How clear were you about where you wanted to go, who you wanted to try and meet?
Yeah, I'm going to go the 70-30 rule, Lee, there. I reckon 70% of my itinerary was largely mapped out. I knew where, in my instance, where the major dairy markets were and where I could do the most learning. And, to Stuart's point before, I'd done a lot of research and by no means a subject matter expert, but certainly knew, quite specific in what I wanted to achieve. But I was also clear that, I wanted to leave space. I think it's a really important point. You do want to leave some space. You don't want an agenda or a travel program that is 100% booked out because you will miss out on opportunities. There'll be flights delayed. You'll meet, I'll meet someone like Stuart and Stuart will go, oh my goodness, you've got to meet person A, B, and C. So you do want to leave some flex in there, but you do want it pretty robust. So for me, I had America, and within America, I had the states and the cities I wanted to go to. I had good contacts there. Similarly, across Europe, ironically, I landed in Silicon Valley. It was my first meeting for a dairy, fellowship. Who would have thought? But it was planned. There was a meeting. Similarly throughout Europe, New Zealand is where it was. So everyone will have their own, but for me, it was about 70% pretty well planned and 30% flex.
And was it similar for you, Stuart?
Well, for me, I originally was going to go to Serbia instead of Poland. And as I was peeling the layers off my final research of who I was going to meet and doing as much as I could before the finalization of my trip, it was like more and more people going, hang on a minute, Poland is the emerging technology. It's the country you have to go to. If you want to see what is the latest thing happening, that's where you need to go. Huge amount of funding from the government there. If you want to go and see a facility that has 1 million pallets of fruit sitting in it. And so I had to adapt and change from my original application as I was coming up to it. And yeah, I was very fortunate to be able to do that.
And Stuart, that goes to the point I was making about, you went from Serbia to, Poland. You didn't go from Serbia to, Montenegro, to New Zealand, right? Yeah. And that goes to just to some of the practicalities around, how much is this thing going to cost? How many weeks are you going to be away?
Yeah.
And that's fine. And we know that as you get into conversations, someone will go, oh, you really need to go and talk to that person. And but there's got to be controlled chaos, is how I describe it.
A good way to put it.
The other thing that you mentioned, and we get asked a lot at these sessions is, what about traveling with other family? And I've had various fellows say, oh my God, no, not on your life. I really need to be disciplined and not miss an opportunity. And I've had other people say, yeah, it was really important for my mental health to have some support. And so really only you know the answer to that. But if you take family with you, think about how much time you're going to have. Think about some of the upsides and the downsides of that. And also just think really practically about the cost, because that will be at your expense. So some fellows have said their families have joined them kind of right at the end. And I think, Tim, you made the point about just building in some space for yourself to think. People talk about the intensity of this experience a lot. So we just ask you to really have to think about all that stuff. And the fact that when you get back, you have to write a report. We don't want to belch you over the head with it, but it is a key part of the process. And if you have been away from your family for 6 weeks and then you come back, not only have you got your boss yelling at you or your business yelling at you or your wife and children going, we had to keep going. So, there's quite a few things to juggle in there to make sure that you're at the right spot in your life to get the most out of this.
And both of you gentlemen, I think you effectively said you'll get out of this what you're prepared to put into it. So building on a little bit of what Christine was just saying a moment ago, when you are actually in the zone, if I can put it that way, if you've been successful, you've got your fellowship, and you have left the country to go and meet people and visit new places, learn new stuff, what is the best advice for those who are successful and who are doing it? Do you have to be totally in the zone, or can you still partially run your business on the road, or what do you think? Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, mine was a little bit different. I was fortunate. Mine did line up quite well with work. I worked for a business called Fonterra, Oceania, which produces Western style butter and whatnot. So this tied in quite nicely, and I was fortunate to sort of get them to support this. So I didn't have to phone in. There were a couple of things I did, but I was really granted that I suppose freedom, for want of a better term. But there was certainly plenty of hooks that come with it when I landed back. But mine, with my family, young family, my wife did come and join for a period of 10 days. But to your point, Christine, she actually come and visited some friends as well. So I was still able to do what I could do. But that worked out really well for us. My key takeaway, Lee, is very much plan. And I'm not a strong planner. So the benefit of planning here will absolutely pay dividends. You'll get better opportunities. You'll need to build in time. It's time to reflect. And another little tip, try and do a bit of report writing, even if it's in draft format as you go. Coming back, for me, someone who doesn't like sitting down and typing a report was a challenge, but it is such a pivotal point, not just for the Churchill Trust, which it is absolutely a requirement, but to get that in your mind, all the work you've done, distill it out in a report is really beneficial, selfishly, as much as I really had to put it down and do it.
And while it's fresh, so you're not drawing on memory, it's very recent experience that you're drawing on if you go down that path, Tim. What about you, Stuart? Your experience in that regard?
Well, for me, it was about how to take notes quickly and effectively. And I think I'm a bit like Tim. I'm like a sheepdog being let out of a cupboard. I don't sit down for a very long period of time. I'm always moving around. But you're meeting a lot of people, learning a lot of information very quickly, and having some quick ways where you can take information and notes that you can reflect back on at a later date. So when you can get back to your hotel, you can add a bit of meat to the bones. For me, I don't think I could write too much of a report while I was doing my fellowship because, hey, it was a lot more intense than what I thought it was going to be. Every country I went to, what I thought might be 1 or 2 days worth of meetings, every one of them, it just expanded out of control once people knew what you were trying to achieve and support. And so I used a lot of like OneNote. I used every single way I could to record the information that was coming to me very, very quickly, because otherwise it would have just slipped through my fingers. And then when I had time, I could go back to my hotel at night time. I could put a bit of meat, like I could expand those notes. And then when I came home afterwards, writing my report, I had what I needed. I had the ingredients to make the cake.
And Stuart, we hear that a lot. People say, download Otter, download your translating apps, try and keep your notes contemporaneous, even if you're not drafting the report, like just kind of, get that stuff down on a page. And just to the point about can you work while you're doing it, from the trust perspective, look, we're not the work police, but we take it pretty seriously that you're doing this, pretty much on a full-time basis. We understand that life is life, right? Everyone's got a life to lead. But if you have, paid leave, we really do expect you to kind of, given that you have beaten 900 or so other people to have a crack at this, that's our expectation. And I did see someone else had asked a question in the Q&A about can you book something and get travel costs reimbursed? The answer is largely no. Like until you get told you've got a fellowship, nothing's on the table. Once you get the fellowship, a whole bunch of stuff is on the table. But I would not encourage you to go and start spending until you get that letter.
Christine, another question that's come up, this one I think you can probably deal with fairly quickly, and that's around referees and something I hadn't actually thought of myself. But do they both have to be Australian citizens and living in Australia now, asks our questioner.
Look, I think the reality is there's a bit more flexibility around that. We want a personal referee and a professional referee, and I'd be interested who Tim and Stuart used. And you want the person who's actually going to give you the best chance of backing you in, right? If you get to that point of referee checks, so don't pick your auntie, pick someone who's going to talk about your resilience and your ability to keep going in the face of adversity, or your natural enthusiasm for things. And we will ask you for your referees 3 days before the applications close, because we've been told by prospective fellows that it's one of the most stressful periods. And so we actually get you to do it and then give you a 72-hour window to finish typing out your application. So that's just a bit of a tip. But I know, Tim and Stuart, you might have something to add to your referee question.
Yeah, I think they're really important to get really sound referees, because once again, this is what will help stand out. I mean, if I was going for one in journalism, getting someone like Lee, bang on, yeah, that's what you want. Someone in that either professional or the personal, because it does carry weight. So I think getting that is really important. So I personally, I had the CEO of the business that I worked for at the time. Was Mary. She was my personal referee, and then from an industry or sort of the subject matter expertise sort of referee was the president of the United Dairy Farmers Association. So sort of the industry plus the personal. So yeah, I think it is really important. So spend some time thinking about it.
Yeah, for me, I had a industry development expert as one of my referees. And the other referee was another manufacturing expert, but more from the industry side, that came with a lot of weight. He was the managing director of Grove Orange Juice, so he'd he'd built factories before. He understood what I was trying to achieve, and I really understood why traveling and getting a fellowship would really assist in the long-time journey and the values behind that. So yeah, referee is very important.
Thanks for that. Tim and Stuart, this is a question that's really caught my eye. From your fellows' experience in returning to Australia after your travels, what did you do to harness the knowledge that you gained while you were away? Big question.
People will come knocking very
Stuart?
quickly. Like, people want to know very quickly what you picked up, and they want you to share it. And I think it's the least that you can do. But I think you have to, that'll happen organically quite well, whether it's through the fellowship, where it's just, it's very free flowing. I don't know about you, Tim, but I had a lot of people approach me wanting to know any learnings, and got asked to share it quite a lot.
Yeah. Tim?
Yeah, I think it is nearly a push and a pull, isn't it? Because you get the pull from whether it's industry or community. They're going, "Hey Tim, we know you've done this, and you actually leaned on me to get some contacts over in Wisconsin. Tell me about it." And to give and then the other bit is push. You've got to push. There's an onus here to deliver back to communities and industries and people that have backed you in. So I think it is both. To give a really specific example, sort of not long after I got back, we had a sort of a dairy industry plan, which was quite big at the time. It was government backing. Out of it actually came legislation through the ACCC. So I certainly played a pivotal role, as did many other people in that. But a lot of that was on the back of not just my networks, but the work I did as part of the Churchill Fellowship. So there are specific things, but I think it's that push-pull model. You'll get pulled into it, but you've also got to push into it as well.
That's brilliant. Another quick question for you both. This is a really practical one now from our questioner. How much time did it take you both to research and prepare your itineraries? Stuart, do you want to go first?
I touched on it briefly before, that my itinerary was established at that time, looking at I hadn't received a fellowship at that stage, and so I put down what I thought was what I knew was going to be the best at the time of the countries and the technologies. And so I did spend a good amount of time, but I had to do that all again once I'd received it, because that's when I started really reaching out to these companies, making that contact, and then learning so much more. So a good amount of time, as much as I could, really, just to make sure that I was doing the right thing and going to the right place.
How about you, Tim?
Yeah, great, Stuart. Certainly that two-stage approach. It's sort of like a draft and then a final, if you will. I think part of it, particularly the draft and indeed the final, will depend a little bit on your inherent knowledge, your contacts, your understanding of sort of travel. But for the application process, you want to leave at least sort of 5 to 10 hours, I think, in the lead up to planning it. Because once again, I'll go back to that sort of original point, Lee. The more you put into this, the more you'll get out of it. And then the actual planning doesn't stop until you get home. And for me, it was when I basically got through the international arrivals to my family. Everyone's in tears. We haven't seen each other for so long, and side note, but I did drop a bottle of sort of duty-free alcohol because I was that excited to see people. But the planning did not stop until I arrived home because you are on the go. You're booking
Yeah.
accommodation and you're changing stuff and you're meeting with fantastic people. So, there's probably those 3 steps. The two that Stuart mentioned, the pre-planning, the draft, the finalising it. But then it's like, okay, now I've got to lock these in. And then it's while you're on the fellowship, while you're on the go.
And another question that I did notice in the chat a while ago was what was the reception you got from your hosts while you were there? And has that relationship continued post returning to Australia? Has there been continual contact, or have you been able to collaborate in any ways? What's your experience been, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just met some tremendous people, and I'd say the overwhelming sort of um, emotion or welcome I got was one of curiosity. People were just super curious to understand what you're doing. You've come either you knew someone or you've come highly recommended by someone, and they go, "Tell me more about this." And depending on which country you went to, even there's sort of the understanding about what the fellowship is and Winston Churchill, and there's various levels of, and then people get curious about your industry and what you do and why you're doing this. So yeah, don't underestimate that. It is real. It is very welcoming. It's a bit terrifying at times. The caliber of some of the people that you do get to meet is sort of nothing. Yeah, I just wouldn't have thought you'd be able to do that. Yeah, but you can. So I'd encourage people to push themselves to do it. Because people are really generous with their time when they know it's going to a good cause. And I think the overarching intent of Churchill Fellowship is one of absolute good cause. Yeah. And then in terms of the two-way, yeah, I mean, I think I'll sort of bring up the old report here. I think I met with 139 people. I'd be lying if I said every single one of those I have a conversation and relationship with now, but absolutely, some of those I do. And indeed, I was at the Australian Dairy Conference last week, and a young lady come up to me and asked me about the process and applying. So it sort of doesn't stop, but you will form relationships out of this, and ones that you don't expect.
Yeah, and amazing the number of people that you met. That really stood out for me when you talked about that earlier, and you've just reconfirmed it. So thank you. Stuart, what about your experience? Is it similar to Tim's?
Very much so, especially not in every country, but definitely in America and in Eastern Europe, especially like Poland. I wasn't expecting anything like the reception that I was received, and the people I think that I mentioned they're just so curious about what you're doing, and they wanted to know about what you'd learned from previous countries or what you're looking for in other countries you're going to as well, because it's their sector as well too. They're like, oh, so what was Poland like? Tell me about that. And so they really jump on the whole journey, and they've got a huge amount of buy-in of what you're doing, and that really tucked me underneath their wing. And I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. We're just about out of
Absolutely.
time, unfortunately, because there are so many questions to potentially to ask you guys to drill into your experience and to benefit from it. But I just want to pick up on one thing that Stuart said earlier, and that was, Stuart, you were so honest in saying this about once you'd actually got the fellowship, you had you experienced imposter syndrome, which surprised me a little bit because it is such a competitive process, and you've got to be good to get to the other end of it. So to then have that reaction, I thought was really interesting. What about you, Tim? Did you experience anything like that, or what was it like for you?
Yeah, and I hope this is not recorded, but I had a bit of an oh shit moment, if I could say that. And it really was, yeah. It's like, oh shit, this is real now. Like, it's not that I wasn't planning on it being real, but it was. But that's when you kick into gear. And I think this is as much as, and there's a fantastic support network. I mean, Christine and her team, what they will support you with is phenomenal. Equally, you've got to do it, yourself.
Mhm.
So for me, that it was that moment. But then you kick into gear because a part of this too, and it's multifaceted, but it absolutely is about self-growth and self-development. And then it's like, okay, the onus is on me, and I've got to get cracking now. So yeah, very similar, and yeah, I think it is another great example and opportunity to really understand that vulnerability that we all have. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't happen to me as well.
I think that when Tim mentioned that you're going to meet some incredible people and you have a little bit of a fanboy moment, like I'm really going to spend some time with these people that are like, yeah, so incredible. And yeah, I think that's yeah, very true.
And building on what both Tim and Stuart said, you really do have to back yourself in. So I see one of the questions is, will the trust help making connections once you've identified who you want to meet with? Really, that's part of what we're looking for from you. That's your own get up and go. And so, that's why I just keep saying to people, back yourself in. Like, you say, I've been awarded a Churchill Fellowship, do some cold call emails, really trust that there's quite a bit of power in the brand, and that will open more doors than you possibly realise.
Yeah, and leverage your networks. This is key. Yeah? I mean, and people will leverage you when you come back. So
Absolutely.
leverage your networks.
And I'm just answering one question here. Yes, the travel does have to be continuous. You cannot come home. It's just a cost that the trust can't bear.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just about out of time, unfortunately, but there's been some really good information this afternoon. I mean, a few things that I've taken out of it. You need to be simple and really clear in the application that you make. The plan that you are pitching to the Churchill Trust has to be achievable too. You've got to be serious about what you're hoping to do and to make it achievable. You both, Tim and Stuart, I think at different points said something along the lines of you need to stand out in the application process as well. Lots of competitive pressure, basically a 1 in 10 chance of being successful through this process. So you've got to do something to stand out. And Tim, you said this, and it really resonated with me at the time. This is something you absolutely must do. If you're thinking about it at the moment, don't think about it. Get onto it and do it, because if you are successful, this will be a life-changing experience for you, and something that you'll carry with you forever. So get on with it. And also the other big message was you get out of it what you put into it. So if you are prepared to go on this trip of a lifetime to meet these amazing people, to open all of these doors, the more effort you put into that, the greater the reward that you will reap at the end of the day. Christine, is there anything that you'd like to add before we finish this afternoon?
Just to thank Stu and Tim. They're just such good examples of this incredible fellows that we have, and that's kind of one of the greatest things about being part of it. You've got to be in it to win it. And I'm really serious. If you are all excited and then you go away and have a think about it, you start thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, not this year. We'll be here next year. We'll be here the year after. Tell other fabulous human beings that you know. We are really dead serious about wanting to hear from you when the time's right.
If you at first you don't succeed, try again.
Absolutely.
Christine, Stuart, Tim, it's been really illuminating, fascinating to hear from you this afternoon, and really appreciate that. And I just want to urge anybody who is in this session this afternoon, this evening, to get on with it, because this is just the most amazing experience, and you will meet incredible people. It will change your life in all sorts of really positive ways. And yeah, the message is don't hesitate, go for it. Great to have your company this afternoon. Churchill are available to answer your questions at any time. If there's anything else that comes to mind post this session, please get in touch with the Churchill Trust, or get onto the website too, churchilltrust.com.au, because there are lots of other questions that have already been posted and answered on the site as well, which might be helpful for you. All the very best in your endeavours, and may you be successful in applying for a Churchill Fellowship. I'm Lee Radford. Great to have spent some time with you. Tim, Stuart, Christine, thank you. Good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.